The tea-loving country of the United Kingdom is known for many things. However, there have been many negatives in the laundry list of positives for the nation, but none more than the killing of Damilola Taylor. What started as a fairly routine day for a schoolboy turned into one of the most harrowing incidences that rocked the nation and the residents of Peckham estate. Even over 2 decades after his death, many still feel the ripple effects of his killing. Welcome back to Twisted Minds. My name is James, and today I'll be going over the story of a young boy residing in the United Kingdom who fell victim to a case of bullying and cult involvement by other children of his time. This is the tragic story of Damilola Taylor. Damilola was born on December 7th, 1989, to 2 Nigerian parents in his country of descent. In the summer of 2000, he relocated to England with his mother and sister, who suffered from acute epilepsy. The family moved for better healthcare for his sister, settling in the South London area of Peckham. Damilola was quite the optimist who was determined to pursue a career in medicine for the sake of his sister and others like her, and wished to put an end to her suffering with improved treatment methods. After their relocation to the United Kingdom, the young lad was enrolled at the Oliver Goldsmith School, where he was captured in a now infamous picture of him smiling broadly in his uniform. There's not much to unpack about Damilola's life before his demise. He was merely 10 years old, with no legend to his name, in a place far away from home. But many fondly remembered him as an empathetic and vibrant child who loved life and knew how to light up a room with his dazzling smile and great sense of humor. The year is 2000, and Taylor was on his way home from a library in Peckham when he was attacked and stabbed. CCTV footage of the incident revealed that Damilola left Peckham Library around 4:51 p.m. before he met his Waterloo only 15 minutes later. Damilola looked his regular self, happy and all smiles, as he skipped toward North Peckham Estate when some assailant surrounded him. A quick jab to his leg with a broken bottle saw the boy limping toward a concrete stairwell, where he subsequently passed out and died within half an hour due to massive blood loss. By this time, his assailants were long gone. It took a long time before someone came through the way again. The passerby was a worker who found Damilola on the stairwell just before dying. The boy, ever an optimist, signaled to the worker that he was okay, only to pass on his way to the hospital. Damilola was 10 days shy of his 11th birthday when the incident occurred. His final moments were spent in the company of John Boyega, a famous Star Wars actor, and his sister Grace. The siblings saw Damilola halfway before parting ways, according to the CCTV footage. All 3 friends and the Boyegas often babysat for the Taylors. News of Damilola's death flew swiftly to Nigeria, where his father, Richard Taylor, labored at the Ministry of Defense. A simple phone call later, Richard's life was a mess. So, how do you console a father who lost his child to mindless violence? Richard Taylor recalled in an interview that he collapsed upon hearing the news. He had no recollection of what had transpired afterward until his revival at the clinic. "I never thought such a thing could happen," he commented. Damilola's death was the beginning of a personal and public ordeal, which catapulted the deceased into the national spotlight as some martyr. His infamous smiling picture became a cultural touchstone that shone a beacon on the covert culture and gang violence and street crime in the United Kingdom. The Taylors went from a quiet Nigerian family who sacrificed their comfort in their home country to save the failing health of a sister, to a family with a murdered loved one. Damilola was the hardest hit in the change of environment, dealing with acceptance and other challenges he was unused to. It was fairly common knowledge at the time that older school children often picked on and bullied younger, more vulnerable kids into giving up their pocket money, which was spent on purchasing drugs. However, Damilola maintained an unwavering optimism and was vocal about his dream of a career in medicine. He even joined a computer club that ran after school hours. He was on his way home from the club, going about with the youthful exuberance of a child when he was attacked and bled to death. The public's reaction was immediate and sustained, with media outrage further adding sparks to the issue. Celebrities like Prince Bola Ajibola, a Nigerian high commissioner, and John Fashanu, a footballer, attended Damiola's funeral. However, while everything seemed to be clear-cut on the media's end, apprehending Damiola's assailants was an extensive, convoluted process. And it wasn't because the police weren't trying. On the contrary, people weren't very willing to open up to the police and participate in the investigation. This led to multiple setbacks and wrong leads that caused the police force several years to close the case. But in the end, they narrowed the list of suspects to 4 teenagers. The suspects were tried in June 2001 at the Old Bailey. But instead of providing closure and justice for the Taylors, the trial turned into a parody. The prosecution's main witness, a girl in her teens called Bromley, was considered compromised and unreliable by the judge. Allegations were flying around that the police had bribed Bromley to testify falsely. These setbacks saw 2 of the accused walk free. Soon afterward, the jury discharged the other 2 defendants as not guilty. The BBC later interviewed Bromley. She confessed that she had indeed not lied. Instead, she was shaken and living under police protection, and was a frightening experience she didn't wish to relive. But even as the trial had fallen into a fiasco, some detectives were committed to sniffing out new leads. Their hard work paid off with the implication of 3 different teenage suspects. By January 2006, the unknown suspects were presented before the Central Criminal Court of England and accused of manslaughter. One of the accused was later freed after proving his innocence. But the other pair, the Preddy brothers, Daniel and Ricky, were convicted of the crime and given an 8-year sentence. There was some outcry about the seemingly short duration of the sentence, but the judge cleared that up. He explained that the brothers were merely 12 and 13 years old and that their attack on Damiola's person wasn't intended to end his life. The build-up to the conviction of the Preddy brothers wasn't so smooth sailing. Many experts chipped in their perspectives on how Damiola came to be with a severed artery on his left thigh. The Metropolitan Police believed that the victim had fallen after the attack and injured himself on a broken bottle. An investigation sprung up from this opinion, codenamed Operation Sealed, which involved over 120 police officers. The result was the arrest of 4 suspects, all charged with murder. On the other side, the defense argued that Damiola was never attacked in the first place and had just fallen on a broken bottle that caused him to bleed out. There were no suspects or forensic evidence to prove this argument. So, in January 2002, when 4 youths were put in trial at the Old Bailey, the prosecution tried to piggyback off of Bromley's testimony. She said she'd seen the attack. However, the judge didn't quite buy her story, and the case fell through. 2 of the accused were acquitted by the judge. The other 2 were passed off as innocent by the jury, and so ended the trial of 4. About a year later, the police, having got their hands on some new forensic techniques, reviewed the evidence of the crime again. At this point, a certain professor, Angela Gallup, was brought in with her team. Other suspects beyond the first 4 had been tried, but the professor pushed to having their clothing checked for evidence that may have been missed due to crude technology. Professor Gallup picked Ross Hammond to oversee the reinvestigation of the suspects. Ross received help from April Robson and other expert examiners, including Tiernan Coyle, one of the best textile fiber experts. After a thorough re-examination of the clothing of the initial suspects, the Preddy brothers were found with textile fibers and blood tying them to Damiola's demise. The team found a blood stain about 9 millimeters long behind a trailer owned by Danny Preddy. In forensics, 9 millimeters is a pretty large stain. However, what makes this discovery special is the embedded textile fiber. Further testing showed that the thread of the trainer was the same one as the fibers of the trainers worn by Damiola at the day he also met his sad fate. Also, the fact that the stain was embedded meant that the blood was still wet when it got on the trainers, which further implicated Danny Preddy. Ricky wasn't free either, as the cuffs on his sweatshirt had traces of blood on the ripping. The traces were so minute that they couldn't be seen with the naked eye against the sweatshirt's fabric, which was dark in color. As a result, a presumptive blood test, like the KM test, was used. Afterward, the blood samples from the sweatshirt and trainers were run through DNA profiling and found to match Damiola's DNA. In 2005, a 19-year-old Hassan Jihad stood on trial for assault and manslaughter alongside the Preddy brothers. The defense in this new trial still maintained their position from the first time. A trauma expert insisted that new evidence, too, that Damilola was not a victim of an attack. Instead, he had fallen on a shard of glass that cut into his artery in his leg. As things progressed, the jury discharged Jihad as not guilty of any charges, but couldn't quite settle on a verdict for the Preddy brothers. For the next few days, the CPS worked toward retrying Danny and Ricky Preddy for the murder of Damilola Taylor. The brothers were popular with the police, having been involved in several robberies before. Both brothers were found guilty of the charge of manslaughter and given an 8-year sentence in youth custody. Forensic evidence proved invaluable to the brothers' conviction and acquitted the first 4 youths that had been tried for the incident. Bringing Damiola's killers to justice took multiple trials, witnesses, and years. It lasted for about 6 years, with 3 trials in between to find and convict the right assailants. The first trial was in 2002, when 4 boys were charged at the Old Bailey for the murder of Damilola Taylor. 2 of the 4 boys were acquitted early into the trial, and the other pair followed suit when the prosecution's primary witness was deemed unreliable. After the case, Richard and Gloria Taylor, Damiola's parents, were interviewed. They promised to continue fighting until their son got the justice he deserved. The next trial came in 2005, when brothers Danny and Ricky Preddy were convicted of charges of manslaughter. Investigations narrowed in on the siblings, with forensic evidence showing invaluable details missed earlier. In 2006, the third trial involving the Preddy brothers alone was carried out, leading to the conclusion of the murder of Damilola Taylor. Danny, for one, was almost always in and out of detention and was constantly being supervised for violent behavior. At Damiola's death, he was supposed to be in a social service home and partaking in a 24-hour curfew. Nearly 4 weeks after the incident with Damilola Taylor, Danny was caught and placed under supervision on the charges of assault with intent to rob. There were other cases of racially aggravated assault also tied to him, which earned him more supervision time. But Danny had no problem breaching the court order. Ricky, the older Preddy sibling, at only 13, was well known for his involvement in thefts and violence. He was also supervised like his brother when Damiola met his fate. Danny was given an early release from prison in 2011, having served 5 of his 8-year sentence. On the other hand, Ricky had been released on parole a year earlier, serving just 4 years of his 8-year sentence. However, their release wasn't permanent, and the boys were in the authorities' crosshairs before long. In March 2011, Danny was returned to prison to continue his sentence after visiting Peckham from his bail hostel in West London, thereby breaching the conditions of his freedom. Upon his return to the system, Danny beat up a fellow prisoner. A parole board called a hearing on December 23, 2011, and they decided on releasing Danny yet again on January 25, 2012. Unsurprisingly, some 16 days after his release, Danny was returned to jail for violating the rules of his parole by visiting areas he was prohibited from and seeing his friends from his former gang. Ricky had managed to stay pretty low-key until 2019, when he was going through Wembley and was pulled over by police. He braked the car and waited for the police to leave their vehicle before backing up and injuring a female police officer. He continued to drive without stopping, but Ricky couldn't run for long and was soon apprehended by the police. Instead, he was slapped with a 12-year driving ban and had to serve about 4 years in prison. In all, the Preddy brothers' penchant for compulsive criminal behavior, as well as the societal context surrounding their actions, have caused the Taylors a lot more pain after the loss of their son. A spokesman for the family revealed to the media outlets that the Taylor family society at large, and also the boys themselves have been failed by the system and the academics that run it. There is some sense to this claim, considering how easily the Preddy brothers were in and out of jail. But given how the judge pinned their relatively short sentences on age, I can't help but wonder what the reasoning is for now that they are grown adults. Richard Taylor has lent his voice in proposing a holistic method of defeating violence in the streets, emphasizing the need to help young people living in deprived communities to steer clear of the repetitive cycle of crime and punishment. His campaigns through the Damilola Taylor Trust have earned him an OBE. The trust continues to pioneer anti-knife crime drives, career development initiatives, and school programs to improve youth's lives. In an interview with the BBC, Richard Taylor noted, "The young people are still killing themselves over nothing. I don't see why this is still going on, but the Damilola Trust has started yielding fruits." It's been over 2 decades since his death, and the 10-year-old Nigerian boy who visited England intending to become a doctor to cure his sister continues to inspire change around him and in others. Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Minds. That was the case of Damilola Taylor, and why don't you go ahead and click on one of the 2 videos on your screen for another one of our videos.